The unexpected encounter, the morning rain drummed against the windows of the daily grind as Rosalie Chen wiped down the espresso machine for the third time. It was one of those Seattle mornings where the sky seemed to press down on the city, turning everything gray and muted. She loved these quiet moments before the rush began, when the small coffee shop felt like her own private sanctuary at 26. Rosalie had been working at the cafe for 2 years, but it was never meant to be permanent. The walls around her were covered with local artists' work, some of it her own watercolor paintings that she'd managed to convince Finn, the owner, to display. Each brushstroke represented her real dream, opening a combination art studio and cafe where creativity would flourish over perfectly brewed coffee. The bell above the door chimed, and Rosalie looked up to see a man she'd never encountered before. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair slightly disheveled from the rain. His charcoal suit was expensive, she could tell from the way it fit his shoulders, but he looked completely out of place among the mismatched vintage, chairs, and local art. Marcus Blackwood stood in the doorway, shaking droplets from his coat. He'd been walking aimlessly through the city for the past hour, trying to clear his head after another brutal board meeting. His company, Blackwood Technologies, was on the verge of the biggest expansion in its history, but the pressure was suffocating. He'd spotted the warm glow of the cafe through the rain and decided to take refuge. "Good morning," Rosalie said, offering her usual bright smile. "What can I get started for you?" Marcus approached the counter, noting the genuine warmth in her voice, something he rarely encountered in his world of calculated conversations and hidden agendas. "Just a black coffee, please. Large." As Rosalie worked, Marcus found himself studying the paintings on the walls. One in particular caught his attention, a vibrant piece showing a rainy street scene, but with splashes of unexpected color that seemed to dance through the gray. "That's beautiful," he said, nodding toward the painting. Rosalie followed his gaze and felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. It's actually one of mine. You painted that?" Marcus stepped closer to examine it. "It's remarkable. You've managed to find beauty in what most people would consider dreary." Something about his tone made Rosalie look at him more carefully. Behind his tired eyes, she glimpsed a loneliness that seemed familiar. "I think there's beauty everywhere," she said softly. "Sometimes we just need to look at things differently." She turned back to prepare his coffee, but her hands were slightly shaky, whether from his unexpected compliment or his intense gaze. She wasn't sure. As she reached for the lid, her fingers slipped, and a few drops of coffee splashed onto his hand. "Oh no, I'm so sorry." Rosalie grabbed a napkin, her face flushing with embarrassment. "I can't believe Hey," Marcus said gently, accepting the napkin. "It's fine. Really?" He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "You know what? This is the best part of my day so far." Rosalie stared at him, surprised. By his reaction, most customers would have been annoyed, especially someone who looked like he had important places to be. Instead, he seemed almost grateful. "Your day must not have started very well then," she said with a small laugh. "You have no idea." Marcus took a sip of his coffee and nodded approvingly. "This is excellent. What's your name?" "Rosalie." "Rosalie." He repeated it as if testing how it sounded. "I'm Marcus, and I have a feeling this won't be my last visit." Here as he left, pressing a generous tip into the jar, despite Rosalie's protests, she watched him disappear into the rain. Something about the encounter felt significant, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. She spent the rest of her shift thinking about his smile and the way he'd looked at her painting, not with polite interest, but with genuine appreciation. Marcus, meanwhile, found himself walking back to his office with lighter steps than he'd had in weeks, the first time in months. He wasn't thinking about profit margins or expansion strategies. Instead, he was thinking about a girl with paint-stained fingers and a smile that seemed to chase away the gray morning. He didn't yet know that this chance encounter would change everything. But somewhere deep down, both of them sensed that something had shifted in the universe, something as simple and profound as two souls recognizing each other across the space of a small coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday morning. The regular customer, 3 days later, Rosalie was arranging fresh pastries in the display case when she heard the familiar chime of the door. She looked up to see Marcus stepping inside, his expensive coat dripping with morning rain once again. A small flutter of excitement caught her off guard. "Black coffee? Large?" she asked, already reaching for a cup. Marcus smiled, pleased that she remembered. "You have a good memory?" "It's part of the job," Rosalie said, though truthfully, she'd been thinking about him more than she cared to admit. "Though I have to say, you're braver than most of our regulars. How many people in suits venture into our little corner of chaos?" She gestured around the eclectic cafe, where Finn O'Sullivan, the 60-something Irish owner, was currently hanging a new piece of local art while humming an old Celtic tune. His wild gray hair and paint-splattered apron made him look more like an artist than a businessman, which wasn't far from the truth. "I like chaos," Marcus said, surprising himself with the admission. "My world is very ... structured. This feels real." As Rosalie prepared his coffee, Marcus found himself studying another one of her paintings, this one showing the cafe itself. But with warm golden light spilling from the windows like liquid sunshine, you really see things differently, don't you? "My friend Jade says I see the world through rose-colored glasses," Rosalie laughed. "She's probably right. She's always trying to bring me back down to earth. Maybe the world needs more people who see it your way." The sincerity in his voice made Rosalie pause. She handed him his coffee, and their fingers brushed for just a moment. "What do you do, Marcus, if you don't mind me asking?" Marcus hesitated. In his world, his name opened doors and changed conversations. People either wanted something from him or treated him differently once they knew about his wealth. "I work in technology, software development mostly." It wasn't entirely a lie, though it was a massive understatement. Blackwood Technologies was worth billions and employed thousands of people worldwide. "That sounds interesting," Rosalie said. "Are you working on anything exciting?" "We're always developing new projects," Marcus replied carefully. "But honestly, I'd rather hear about your art. How long have you been painting?" Rosalie's face lit up at the question. "Since I was 7. My brother Gabriel used to tease me because I'd rather paint than play video games with him. But Finn here," she nodded toward the owner, "he gave me my first real chance to display my work." Finn looked up from his art-hanging duties and grinned. "Best decision I ever made, lad," he said to Marcus. "Our Rosalie's got more talent in her little finger than half the artists in this city. Mark my words, she'll have her own gallery someday." Rosalie blushed furiously. "Finn, stop embarrassing me in front of the customers." "I'm just stating facts, love." Finn winked at Marcus. "You've got good taste coming in here every day. It's best coffee in Seattle and the finest company." Marcus felt his chest tighten with an unfamiliar emotion. Every day. Had he really been coming here every day? He realized with surprise that he had been. What had started as a random refuge from the rain had become the highlight of his morning routine. Over the following weeks, Marcus's visits became as regular as clockwork. He'd arrive at 7:30 a.m., order his black coffee, and spend a few minutes talking with Rosalie before heading to his office. He learned that she lived in a small apartment above a bookstore, that she volunteered at a local community center teaching art to kids, and that her biggest dream was to open a combination art studio and cafe where people could create while enjoying good coffee. Jade Martinez, Rosalie's best friend and a pragmatic lawyer, started noticing the pattern during her own morning coffee runs. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her late 20s, with short black hair and a no-nonsense attitude. That perfectly complemented Rosalie's dreamy nature. So Jade said one morning, after Marcus had left, "Who's the suit?" "His name is Marcus," Rosalie said, wiping down the counter with unnecessary attention. "He's just a regular customer." "Unhung? And I'm just a regular lawyer," Jade raised. An eyebrow rose. "I've been watching him for 2 weeks. That man looks at you like you're the only person in the room. And that suit? That's not off the rack. It's custom Italian tailoring." "You're being dramatic," Rosalie protested, but her cheeks were pink. "Am I? Because I did a little digging." Jade pulled out her phone. "There's only one Marcus who fits his description working in tech around here. And honey, if it's who I think it is, you need to be careful." Before Jade could elaborate, Finn approached with a knowing smile. "Let the girl enjoy herself, Jade. When's the last time you saw our Rosalie this happy? The lad seems decent enough to me." Jade frowned. "Decent doesn't mean safe, rich, powerful. Men don't usually hang around coffee shops for the atmosphere, Finn. Meanwhile, Marcus was having his own internal struggle. Back in his glass office overlooking Elliott Bay, found himself distracted during important meetings. Thinking about Rosalie's laugh, or the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. His assistant had started commenting on his improved mood, and his business partner Trevor Nash had noticed his newfound reluctance to work late. "You seem different lately," Trevor observed during their weekly strategy meeting. More relaxed. "Have you been taking those meditation classes I recommended?" Marcus almost laughed. If Trevor only knew that his zen came from a 26-year-old. Barista with paint under her fingernails and dreams bigger than her bank account. "Something like that," Marcus replied, turning back to the financial reports spread across the conference table. But even as he tried to focus on quarterly projections and market analyses, his mind kept drifting to a small cafe where genuine smiles were served alongside perfectly brewed coffee. That evening, as Marcus worked late in his penthouse office, he made a decision that would have surprised everyone who knew him. He pulled out his laptop and began researching local art studios and community programs. If Rosalie wanted to teach art and open her own place, maybe there was a way he could help without her ever knowing it was him. For the first time in years, Marcus Blackwood was thinking about someone else's dreams instead of just his own empire. Dreams and discoveries. The morning rush at the daily grind was unusually hectic when Vivian Blackwood walked through the door. At 34, Marcus's older sister possessed the same sharp intelligence as her brother, but with a warmth he often struggled to show. Her designer handbag and perfectly styled auburn hair marked her as someone from a different world than the cafe-as-usual clientele. Rosalie was juggling 3 orders. She noticed the elegant woman studying the paintings on the walls with genuine interest. Unlike most customers who barely glanced at the local art, this woman was taking careful note of each piece. "I'll be right with you," Rosalie called out, steam rising from the espresso machine. "Take your time," Vivian replied, her voice cultured. "But kind. I'm actually hoping to speak with the artist who created these watercolors." Rosalie's hand stilled on the coffee cup she was preparing. "That would be me." Vivian's eyes lit up with recognition, not of Rosalie herself, but of the talent she'd been hearing about secondhand. "Your brother has excellent taste," she murmured, too quietly for Rosalie to hear. After the morning rush died down, Vivian approached the counter. "I'm Vivian. I run an art consulting business, and I have to say, your work is extraordinary." That piece there, she pointed to a painting of Pike Place. Market bustling with life despite the rain, captures something most artists spend years trying to achieve. Rosalie felt her heart race. "Thank you. That means more than you know. I'd like to commission a piece, if you're interested. Something for my brother's office. He's been incredibly stressed lately. I think he could use more beauty in his workspace." Da-da-da-da! As they discussed details, Finn emerged from the back room, carrying a box of new mugs. "Vivian Blackwood, as I live. And breathe," he said with a grin. "How's that brother of yours? Still working himself to death?" Rosalie's blood turned to ice. "Blackwood." Vivian shot Finn a warning look, but the damage was done. "You know Marcus?" Rosalie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Know him?" Finn chuckled, oblivious to the tension. "Eslas has been asking about him every day for weeks. He's always wanting to know when the mysterious businessman will be in. Here you are, his sister, commissioning art from the very girl who Finn." Vivian interrupted gently. "Perhaps we should let Rosalie process this information." But Rosalie was already pulling off her apron, her hands shaking. "I need some air," she said. Rushing toward the back exit, Vivian found her in the alley behind the cafe, sitting on a milk crate and staring at her paint-stained fingers. "He didn't tell you who he was. It wasn't a question." Rosalie shook her head, unable to speak. "My brother is Marcus Blackwood of Blackwood Technologies," Vivian said softly, sitting on another crate despite her expensive outfit. "But I'm guessing. You're wondering why that matters?" "'Cause I'm an idiot," Rosalie whispered. "I should have known. Expensive clothes, the way he carries himself. The fact that he can afford to tip $20 on a $5 coffee without thinking. Twice. Or maybe," Vivian suggested gently, "you saw him as a person instead of a bank account. Do you know how rare that is in Marcus's world?" Rosalie looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "He lied to me. Did he? Or did he just not volunteer?" Information that would change how you saw him? Vivian leaned forward. My brother has been a different person these past few weeks. Lighter. Happier. He hums in the car rosily. Marcus hasn't hummed since we were children. Meanwhile, Marcus was in his downtown office, 30 floors above the city, completely unaware that his carefully constructed walls were crumbling. He was reviewing plans for a community art program he'd been secretly funding when Trevor burst through his door. We have a problem, Trevor announced, dropping a tablet on Marcus's desk. The screen showed financial records and background checks. I had our security team run standard checks on the people you've been interacting with lately. And Marcus, you need to see this. Marcus's jaw tightened. You investigated Rosalie? Standard protocol when someone gets close to you? At this, she's been researching ways to get funding for art programs. Specifically, she's been looking into grants and investors for something called Canvas and Coffee. Marcus. What if she knows who you are? What if this whole thing has been calculated? The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd been burned. Before by people who wanted access to his wealth and connections. The possibility that Rosalie might be different had made him hope, but now doubt crept in like poison. There's more, Trevor continued. Her best friend, Jade Martinez, works for Peterson and Associates. They handle several of our competitors. Legal work. This could all be corporate espionage. Marcus stared at the files, his heart sinking. Everything seemed to fit too perfectly the coincidental meetings. Her interest in his opinions about her art, even her dream of opening her own place. Had he been played by someone clever enough to seem genuine? Back at the cafe, Rosalie had returned to work, but her usual brightness was dimmed. When Marcus walked through the door at his usual time, the air between them felt different. He could see it in her eyes, she knew. The usual, she asked, but her voice was carefully neutral. Marcus studied her face, searching for signs of deception or calculation. Instead, he saw hurt and disappointment, emotions that seemed too genuine to fake. Rosalie, I can explain. Can you? She set his coffee on the counter with more force than necessary. Because I'm trying to figure out why a billionaire CEO would pretend to be just another tech worker. Is this some kind of social experiment? Research for a new app? The accusation stung because it echoed Trevor's warnings. It wasn't like that, Marcus said quietly. I just wanted to be seen as myself, not my net worth. And what about me? Rosalie's voice cracked slightly. Did you think I was after your money? Is that why you've been coming here, to see how long it would take for the gold-digging barista to show her true colors? The question hung between them like a chasm. Marcus realized that this was the moment of truth, not just about who he was, but about what he believed about her. Looking into her eyes, seeing the genuine pain there, he made his choice. No, he said firmly. I think you're the most honest person I've ever met, and I think I've fallen in love with you. The confession silenced the entire cafe. Finn stopped. Wiping down tables, and even the espresso machine seemed too quiet. Rosalie stared at Marcus, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. But before she could respond, Vivian's words from the alley echoed in her mind. Do you know how rare that is in Marcus's world? Maybe the question wasn't whether he'd been dishonest with her, but whether she could be brave enough to trust him, despite the vast difference in their circumstances. I don't know what to do with that, Rosalie admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Neither do I, Marcus replied. But I'd like to figure it out together. As they stood there, facing each other across the counter that had brought them together. Both realized that their simple story had just become infinitely more complicated. The impossible choice 2 weeks had passed since the revelation. An uncomfortable distance had settled between Marcus and Rosalie. Still came to the cafe each morning, but their conversations were polite and careful, stripped of the easy warmth they'd once shared. Both were trying to navigate the new reality of their situation when fate decided to complicate things further. Harold Pemberton, chairman of Blackwood Technologies Board, was a man who believed that business should never be personal. At 68, he'd built his reputation on making hard decisions. And he viewed Marcus's recent distraction as a threat to the company's most ambitious expansion yet. The Tokyo deal is worth $3 billion, Marcus, Harold said, his voice carrying the weight of decades in boardrooms. Yamamoto Industries won't wait forever for our decision. They want you there personally to oversee the integration. This is the opportunity we've been building toward for 5 years. Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room, looking down at the city below. Somewhere out there, Rosalie was probably preparing for the afternoon rush. At the cafe, her hands sure and graceful as she created art from simple ingredients. The terms require permanent relocation to Tokyo, Marcus said without turning around. That's not negotiable. I'm afraid not. Yamamoto-san was very clear about wanting hands-on American leadership. You'd be heading up the entire Pacific expansion. It's exactly what you've always said you wanted. Your own empire, separate from the family business. Trevor, sitting across the polished conference table, leaned forward. Marcus, this is everything we've worked for. The salary alone is more than most people see in 10 lifetimes. And after that investigation I ran, maybe some distance from Seattle would be healthy. The investigation. Trevor had presented his findings like a prosecutor building a case. Rosalie's research into art funding. Her friend's connections to competing firms, even the timing of their first meeting. All circumstantial, but enough to plant seeds of doubt. That had been growing in Marcus's mind despite his heart's protests. I need time to think, Marcus said finally. Time is the one thing we don't have, Harold replied. Yamamoto expects an answer by Friday. It's 3 days, Marcus. Meanwhile, across town, Rosalie was facing her own impossible choice. Luna Rodriguez, one of Seattle's most respected gallery owners, had been studying Rosalie's portfolio for the better part of an hour. Her gallery, Luna Contemporary, was known for launching careers and changing lives. Your work is extraordinary, Luna said, closing the portfolio with obvious reluctance. There's an emotional honesty here. It's rare in contemporary art. I want to offer you something I've never offered an unknown artist. Rosalie felt her heart stop. What do you mean? A solo show? 6 months from now? But with one condition, I'd need you to commit to producing 15 new pieces, and they'd need to be your best work yet. The kind of pieces that announce you're not just a talented amateur, but a serious artist ready for the national stage. The opportunity was everything Rosalie had dreamed of, but Luna's next words made her stomach drop. However, I have to be honest about the timeline. Creating work of that caliber while working full-time would be nearly impossible. You'd need to focus entirely on your art for the next 6 months. No distractions, no other commitments. Rosalie thought about her morning shifts at the cafe, her evening art classes with neighborhood kids, and, despite everything, Marcus, I'd have to quit my job. I'm afraid so. But Rosalie, this is your chance. I've seen 1,000 talented artists never make it because they couldn't commit fully to their craft. Don't be one of them. That evening, Jade found Rosalie sitting on her apartment fire escape, staring at Luna's business card as if it held answers to questions she didn't know how to ask. You should take it, Jade said without preamble, settling beside her friend. On the metal grating. This is what you've always wanted, is it? Rosalie asked. 6 months ago, I thought I wanted to combine art with community, a place where people could create together over coffee. Now I'm being offered a chance at serious recognition, but I'd have to give up everything that inspired the art in the first place. You're thinking about him, Jade observed. Rosalie didn't deny it. Things have been so strange between us since I found out who he really is. But Jade, when I look at my paintings from the past few months, the ones Luna loves most, they're all influenced by how he made me see things differently. What if my best work comes from that connection? And what if it doesn't? Jade challenged gently. Rose, you're incredibly talented, but you can't build a career on one person's inspiration. What happens when he gets bored and moves on to someone new? The question hit home because it echoed Rosalie's own fears. She'd seen Marcus's world in other boardrooms and expensive suits, the weight of decisions worth billions of dollars. How long before a barista with paint-stained fingers stopped being charming and started being an embarrassment? The next morning, Marcus arrived at the cafe to find Rosalie cleaning the espresso machine with unusual intensity. Her movements were sharp, focused, as if she was trying to scrub away her doubts along with the coffee stains. You seem distracted, he said, accepting his usual black coffee. I have a decision to make, Rosalie replied, not meeting his eyes. A big one. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Anything I can help with? The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Here they were, two people who had found something real together, both facing choices that could take them away from each other permanently. Actually, Rosalie said, finally looking up at him. I keep wondering if you were right that first day when you said, I see the world through rose-colored glasses. Maybe I do see beauty where it doesn't really exist. That's not true, Marcus said quietly. Your art, the way you see things, it's real. It changed how I see the world. Did it? Because it seems like you're still living in the same world you always were? The one where people can't be trusted, where every interaction might be calculated. The accusation hung between them, and Marcus realized she was right. Despite his confession of love, despite everything he felt for her, he'd still been holding back, still protecting himself behind walls of suspicion and doubt. I got offered a job, Marcus said suddenly. In Tokyo, $3 billion expansion. Everything I thought I wanted. Rosalie's face went carefully blank. Congratulations. Haven't accepted it yet? But you're going to. It wasn't a question. Marcus looked at Hurley, looked tanned, saw not calculation or deception, but a woman who was trying to protect her heart just as much as he was protecting his. In that moment, he realized that Trevor's investigation had been less about uncovering the truth and more about confirming his own fears. I don't know, he admitted. I keep thinking about what I'd be leaving behind. Don't, Rosalie said softly. Don't make that kind of decision based on someone you've known for a few weeks. That's not fair to either of us. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Harold. Yamamoto expecting answer tomorrow. Board meeting at 2 p.m. As Marcus left the cafe, both he and Rosalie were thinking the same thing. Sometimes the biggest risk isn't taking a chance on love, but believing that love can survive in a world that seems determined to tear it apart. The perfect blend. The boardroom was silent, except for the soft tapping of Harold Pemberton's pen against the mahogany table. Marcus sat at the head of the conference room, a contract worth $3 billion spread before him, unsigned. Every board member was watching him with barely concealed frustration. Marcus, Harold said finally, his patience wearing thin. Yamamoto Industries has been waiting for 48 hours. They're prepared to withdraw the offer if we don't respond within the next 2 hours. Marcus looked around the table at faces. He'd known for years Trevor, Harold, the other executives who had helped build Blackwood Technologies into an empire. These were people who understood profit margins and market expansion, but none of them understood why he was hesitating over the opportunity of a lifetime. I need to make a call, Marcus said, standing abruptly. Marcus, as Trevor began, give me 5 minutes. Instead of calling, Marcus found himself walking. He left the tower, left his corporate world behind, and walked the familiar route too, the daily grind. Through the window, he could see Rosalie behind the counter. Her movements efficient but lacking their usual grace. Even from outside, he could see the tension in her shoulders. Gabriel Chen was visiting his sister when Marcus arrived. At 28, Rosalie's younger brother had inherited the same artistic eye, but channeled it into architecture instead of painting. He'd been skeptical when Rosalie told him about the mysterious businessman who'd become a regular. But seeing Marcus now standing outside the cafe like a man at a crossroads, Gabriel began to understand. You're him, Gabriel said when Marcus finally entered. It wasn't a question. Gabriel, Rosalie warned, but her brother held up a hand. The guy who's got my sister painting like her life depends on it. The one who inspired those pieces that gallery owner is so crazy about. Gabriel studied Marcus with the calculating eye of someone who'd spent years protecting his sister. You know she's been offered a solo show? Marcus felt his heart sink. She didn't tell me. Probably because she's as scared as you are, Gabriel observed. Rose, tell him about Luna's offer. Rosalie shot her brother a look that could have melted steel, but she'd run out of energy for pretending. It doesn't matter. I turned it down this morning. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. What? Why? Because I realized something, Rosalie said, finally meeting his eyes. That gallery owner wanted me to create art in isolation, to cut myself off from everything that inspires me. But my best work, the pieces she loved most, they came from connection, from community, from feeling like I belonged somewhere. She gestured around the cafe where Finn was helping an elderly customer choose a painting, where the afternoon regulars were settled into their favorite corners, where the walls displayed not just her work but pieces from a dozen local artists. I don't want to be a famous artist if it means losing what makes the art meaningful in the first place. Marcus stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time what Trevor's investigation had missed entirely. Rosalie's research into art funding hadn't been about targeting him. It had been about finding ways to support other artists, to create the kind of community space she'd always dreamed of. "I've been an idiot," Marcus said quietly. "Yes," Gabriel agreed cheerfully. "But so has she." Before either of them could protest, Gabriel continued. "Rose, you turned down the show because you were afraid. And Marcus, you've been second-guessing. Everything because you can't believe someone could want you for who you are instead of what you have. You're both overthinking this." Marcus's phone buzzed insistently. Harold, no doubt, wondering where he was. But for the first time in weeks, Marcus knew exactly where he belonged. "I have something to tell you," Marcus said to Rosalie.
About?
"That Tokyo job, don't," Rosalie said quickly. "Don't make career decisions because of me. That's not fair to either of us." "You're right," Marcus said. "It's exactly why I'm turning it down." The cafe went quiet. Even Finn stopped mid-conversation to listen. "I'm turning it down because I realized something this morning. All my life I've been building toward the next deal, the next expansion, the next milestone. But for the first time, I found something that made me want to stay in one place." He looked directly at Rosalie. "It's not because of you, but because of who I am when I'm with you." Rosalie felt tears prick her eyes. Marcus, ... Marcus continued. "August an hour ago," Marcus continued. "I told her I wanted to discuss funding for a different kind of space. Not a traditional gallery, but an art studio and community cafe. Somewhere artists can work, teach, display their pieces, and build the kind of connections that make art meaningful." "You did what?" Rosalie's voice was barely a whisper. "I can't paint," Marcus said with a small smile. "I can provide resources. I can help create the kind of place you've always dreamed of. If you want to partner with me, not as my employee, not as someone I'm trying to impress, but as equals building something together." Gabriel grinned and nudged his sister. "I told you he was the one." "Gabriel," Rosalie protested, but she was laughing through her tears. Finn appeared at Marcus's elbow with a steaming cup. "Black coffee large," he said with a wink. "Though I have a feeling you might be expanding your usual order soon." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully, then looked back at Rosalie. "There's one more thing. That investigation Trevor ran on you, I know about it, and I know it was wrong. I should have trusted what I felt instead of what the report said." "What did they say?" Rosalie asked, curious despite herself. "That you might be too good too." "Be true," Marcus admitted. "Turns out they were right about one thing: you were too good to be true, but you're also real, and that's what scared me most." 1 year later, the grand opening of Canvas and Coffee drew a crowd that spilled out onto the sidewalk. The space was everything Rosalie had dreamed of: high ceilings filled with natural light, easels stationed throughout the cafe area, a teaching studio in the back, and walls covered with work from local artists of all skill levels. Vivian stood near the entrance, chatting with Luna Rodriguez about the pieces on display. Harold Pemberton, who had initially been furious about Marcus's decision, was deep in conversation with Gabriel about sustainable architecture. Even Trevor had come around, especially after seeing the community impact reports that showed how the space was revitalizing the entire neighborhood. Marcus found Rosalie in the teaching studio, where she was putting finishing touches on a new piece of watercolor, showing the cafe full of people creating, learning, and connecting over coffee. It perfectly captured what they'd built together. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. Rosalie leaned back against his chest, watching through the glass partition as Finn taught a group of teenagers how to pull the perfect espresso shot while Jade helped a nervous first-time painter choose colors for her canvas. "Just one," Rosalie said, turning in his arms. I regret waiting so long to trust that some stories really do have happy endings. Marcus kissed her then, tasting coffee and possibility, surrounded by the gentle chaos of artists at work and the warm hum of community they'd created together. Outside, Seattle's perpetual rain painted patterns on the windows, but inside, canvas and coffee. There was nothing but light, laughter, and the perfect blend of dreams coming true.